Yet. Normally everybody gets off work by about 5 o'clock, and then there's traffic. So you guys must be playing hooky. Vacation. So let's start off with a prayer, the one that we normally chant, Asatoma. And if you know it, just chant along. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya Namaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Avir Avir Mahedi Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Te namam pahi nityam, te namam pahi nityam, om shanti shanti shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through. And ever protect us with thy loving presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. Well, friends, thank you so much for coming, especially for this special afternoon. Today, we have the privilege of having Swami Sarvapriyananda, who's coming from India, and he'll be giving 2 talks. For those that don't know Swami Sarvapriyananda, I think we may have sent a little bit of an introduction about him?
Not much.
Okay.
Just please come.
He's been on a whirlwind journey. He's been here about 30 days, and in 30 days he's visited how many places, Maharaj, have you?
Last count.
He's been going all over the United States, giving talks, staying, traditionally in India, you don't stay, the traditional monk wouldn't stay in any place longer than 3 days. So he's been like this, not staying in any place, usually longer than 3 days, going from place to place, because he has been known to be a very wonderful speaker. He actually joined in 1993 in Deogar, and he was a principal there in the educational institution. He went from there to our place in Balboa, where there's an institution called Sardapit. It's a university, and there he was served as principal for like a teachers training program, where people who'd come to become teachers would attend this training program, and he was their principal. And now he's been what we call an acharya, a teacher at our training center in Bellarmont. We have what's called a monastic seminary, where young novice monks come, and they spend 2 years learning about Indian philosophy, the teachings of Ramakrishna Vedanta, the Gita, and so forth. So he's one of the acharyas. And he was telling me at one time he was giving about 15
Per week?
21 classes per week as an acharya. So he's also probably the most popular YouTube Swami from our order. And so we're really privileged and happy to have him, Swami Sarvapriyananda. What we're going to do is this. He's going to give a talk. The first talk will be on the one and the many. And the second talk will be at 7 o'clock about, that is the talk, Swami, reducing stress, reducing stress through Vedanta and yoga. So we won't have any time for questions for the first talk. We're going to have a question period to answer at the end of the second talk from 8 to 8:30. Swami Sarvapriyananda.
his seat taken? No?
That's okay. Om Stapakaya Jagannasya Sarvapriyananda Swarupi Avadara Vadishnaya Ramakrishna Order. Swami Harinamanandaji and sisters and brothers in spiritual life. Oh, that reminds me. Last week I was in Chicago and I got caught in the blizzard too. I've never seen so much snow in my life. And that's where Swami Vivekananda came to the United States more than 100 years ago in 1893 and into Chicago, and where he famously addressed Americans as sisters and brothers of America. And Obama, who's from Chicago, he went to India last week and he started one of his speeches with sisters and brothers of India, and when he said, a traveler from your country came to my country, my town, 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, and called us sisters and brothers of America. This is why I'm calling you sisters and brothers of India. But sisters and brothers in spiritual life, the subject before us is actually pretty subtle. So one and the many. You see, it starts off with what Swami Vivekananda used to do here in America more than 100 years ago. Quite often, in order to explain the essence of spiritual life, explain the essence of religion, he would quote from the Upanishads one of the verses, which was a favorite of his, and it's extremely poetical, and like many verses in the Upanishads, we don't know who wrote it. Thousands of years ago, they are the oldest living scriptures of the world. Some sage, a few thousand years ago, on the bank of some river in India, he stood up and proclaimed, I'll tell you the Sanskrit and give you the English. Shrinvantu Vishwe Amritasya Putraha. Listen, ye children of immortal bliss. Aye dhamani divyanitas. And if there are any gods in heavens, you listen too. Now, what I'm going to tell you is something that even you don't know. Something new, something incredible. Now it's interesting that we who know one thing for sure, if we know nothing else, we know one thing for sure. The death is certain. We are mortal. Death is certain. It's an unpleasant fact from which we turn our faces away, but death is certain. Swami Vivekananda himself put this so powerfully. He says, kings die and beggars die. Sages die and fools die. The rich die and the poor die. The old die, the young die too. So death is something that is certain. We are mortal. Whether there is God or not, whether science, religion, whatever. But here is the sage addressing us, all people across oceans of time and space, all of us, even today here, sitting here in San Diego. Children of immortal bliss. This is what Swami Vivekananda would stress. You're children of immortal bliss. You're immortal. In what sense and how are we immortal? The sage says, Vedaham Purusham Mahantam. I have known an infinite reality. I have known the infinite reality. Purusham Mahantam. Purusham literally means man, one of the meanings. Another meaning is a conscious being, Purusham. Another meaning would be the reality. So Purusham Mahantam, infinite. I have known the infinite reality. And what is this infinite reality that you have known? What's it like? Aditya Varnam. Tamasah Parastha. Look at the language. Blazing forth like the sun. Blazing forth like the sun, not with the material light like the sun's light, but with the light of consciousness. Tamasah Parastha. Beyond darkness. Beyond the darkness of death, of despair, of sorrow and suffering, there is an infinite reality. And I have known that. What good is that? If you know that reality, what good is it? Tameva viditva ati mrityumeti. Knowing that reality or realizing that reality, one goes beyond death. One goes beyond death. One becomes immortal. One goes beyond sorrow and suffering. One goes beyond all sorts of limitations. I remember once I was reading philosophy, and American philosophy too, and the philosophy of pragmatism, Charles Peirce, Dewey, William James. And I asked one of my Vedanta teachers, a very senior monk, you see, pragmatism tells us truth and utility are related. If it is of use in life, if it makes a difference, then it is true, it is real. What good is Vedanta? How is it real? How is it true? What does it do for us? What's the pragmatic value of Vedanta? And then Swami, he said two things. He said, why does use have to be a criterion of truth? It is good because it is true, even if it had no use at all. But having said that, it has the highest use of all. Atyantika dukkha nivritti paramananda praptishta. These are Sanskrit terms. What does it mean? It takes us beyond sorrow and suffering. Complete cessation of sorrow and suffering. Atyantika dukkha nivritti. Paramananda praptishta. Attainment of ultimate bliss, or permanent bliss. This is the result of Vedanta. This is the goal of Vedanta. And so, what can be of greater use than this? So he answered my question that yes, pragmatically speaking, there is nothing more pragmatic than Vedanta, because it is that which will take us beyond our suffering and sorrow and gives us permanent bliss. But what about any other way? Don't we have so many other ways? One of the most ancient philosophies of India, the Sankhya philosophy, in one of their old texts, it starts off with this question that why inquire into spiritual life at all? It's beautiful, the way it starts off. It's a tiny book called Sankhya Karika, written at least 14 to 1600 years ago. And it was translated into Chinese. I came across a translation some 1500 years old into Chinese. And they're going to make a new translation into Chinese now. Anyhow, the little treatise on spiritual life starts up with this question. Why inquire into spiritual life at all? Because all of our problems can be dealt with in this life. That is one question which is raised. And the answer given is, no, it cannot. All that we can do in this life, in all our methods, whether modern medicine, or methods of entertainment, or our social systems, capitalism, socialism, free market, whatever, politics, ideologies, all of them, they can help us some of the time and to some of the way. None of them can guarantee permanent peace and satisfaction. All of them are good. They are needed in their respective places, but they do not answer the deepest longing of the human heart. And they do not provide any ultimate solution to our questions and to our problems. It is only spirituality. And here spirituality is used in the broadest sense. The Rishi says, Nanyah pantha vidyati ayanaya. There is no other road which will give you complete cessation of sorrow and attainment of ultimate bliss. Now Swami Vivekananda said, this is the promise of all religion. It's not just the Vedic religion, it's not just Vedanta. In fact, in different language, clothed in different mythology, every religion actually promises this. In some way it promises in the form of a god or in the form of a nirvana or something, it promises a transcendence of human limitation. Now this was the core idea in the Upanishads, that there is something, that is the ultimate reality which takes us beyond human suffering and limitation. Now given that there is such a thing, the philosophers in India got down to this idea, what is our relationship with this ultimate reality? Call it God or whatever, or Brahman. What is our relationship? And a lot of philosophies were generated from this question. How do we relate to this infinite being? One of the philosophies is called dualism. Dvaita. Dualism. Which says that infinite being is God. We are limited creatures. And God is the Lord, the creator of everything, preserver of everything. And we are the children of God or the servants of God. This was one approach. It's called Dvaita Vedanta. And you can see immediately most religions of the world would fit into this category. So God is there and we worship God. And that's very good. That's one approach. Another group came up and said, no, we are not different from this reality. We are not different from this infinite reality. We are parts of that reality. It's not that there is that reality and we are different from it, but there are parts of that reality. And they were called Vishishtadvaita, qualified monism or qualified non-dualism. Qualified in the sense, it is one reality called God, and we are all parts of it. God qualified by the existence of living creatures and this non-living insentient world. Sentient creatures and non-sentient world, insentient world. So God, the one reality qualified by technical terms, Jiva and Jagat. It's called Vishishtadvaita, qualified non-dualism or qualified monism. And some went much further and they said obliterate all difference between the individual and God. There is no difference between you and God. If you would know yourself truly, you would find God. If we would only know ourselves truly, we would find God really within us. Our true nature is God. I and God are one. You are God. In the ultimate analysis, when you realize it. That is Advaita, non-difference between the individual and God. So you have the relationship between the infinite spiritual reality which the Vedas speak of, which all religions speak of in some way or the other, and the relationship between that reality and us as the Lord and the servant, or the Lord and the devotee, or the child of the Lord. Dualism, different, we are different. Two, that is one of which we are parts. Parts of the whole and part relationship. And third, the non-dual approach, where we are all one actually in that divine reality. I can maybe put it down here. Let me call that ultimate reality, spiritual reality, the one. The one. And all this that we experience now, all this we are seeing right now here, are the many. So we and the word is the many. And that one spiritual reality which religion, spirituality talks about is the one. And what is the relationship between them? We can speak about three right away. One is dualism. Technically Dvaita. And other one is qualified. Sounds like heavy going, but basically it's very simple really. Qualified monism. It's one reality but whole and part. Vishishtadvaita. Vishishta means qualified and Advaita means non-dual. So qualified non-dualism or qualified monism. And the third one would be the one and the many. There's no difference. It is only one. There's no many. The one alone exists. So non-dualism. The second one does not exist. No many. Advaita. Is it visible at that? Yes, okay. So what is the difference? Dvaita says the one and the many are different. One is a spiritual reality and many are subservient to it. We are devotees, we are children of the Lord. Qualified monism says the one is the whole of which the many are parts. We are parts of the whole. And non-dualism says the many are not, one alone is. Swami Vivekananda once, when he was in this country and he taught, and one of his disciples, Mary Hale, this young American lady, she once wrote a poem to him, summarizing what she thought were his teachings. She said, what you have taught, I understand what you have taught, that all is God. And Swami Vivekananda wrote back, I have never taught such queer doctrine, that all is God. What I have said, that God alone is, the all is not. You can see he is talking about this. The one alone is. What appears to be a variety is not, it's an appearance. God alone is real, the world is an appearance or illusion or mithya or false or whatever you call it. So, that is another variety. But these are all again what would be classified in India as the Astika, the orthodox schools. And there are many other orthodox schools. These are the Astika of the Vedanta. These are some of the orthodox teachers. Orthodox in what respect? They accept the Vedas as scripture, as revealed scripture. But there are those, there were those in India, there are those who do not accept the Vedas as scripture. They also have their views. And there are many such views. In India, they were always very liberal. I mean, you can have any kind of views about religion and spirituality, and it will always be open to reason, debate. And there was no persecution. No persecution. There's those, like, I am right and you are wrong, so you deserve to die. That was not there at all. Never. And so there was a variety of religious opinion. Swami Vivekananda says in one place, in India, society was rigid. So caste system and a lot of social practices were fixed and rigid and unchanging. So society was sort of fossilized over thousands of years. But religion, people had infinite variety in religion. In the same family, people could follow different approaches. So husband and the wife and the mother and the son and daughters, they could worship different gods and goddesses in different forms. And that would be fine. But society was very rigid. There was very strong conventions. And then he says, when he came to America and went back to USA, to India, and he said, look at their country. They have given freedom to society, at least recently, when he came to America. And so what a wonderful society they have built. But on the other hand, look at their religion. So religion was very conservative when Swami Vivekananda came here in the late 19th century. It still is in some ways, but not far less so. In India, you had a wide variety of schools. So there were those who were Nastika. For the Americans here, this doesn't mean much. For the Indians, it's misleading. Because to Indian ears, Astika and Nastika literally sound like those who believe in God and those who do not believe in God. To Indians, it sounds like that. But that would be wrong. Because technically, Astika means those who accept the Vedas as revealed scripture and those who do not. And both were equally honored philosophers. So this would be the heterodox schools. And among them were the Buddhists, who are well known. And especially in USA, thanks to Dalai Lama, thanks to Zen and Vipassana and mindfulness, so Buddhism is very well known. And its origin of this religion was in India, 2,500 years ago. It's an ancient religion. Hinduism is even more ancient. And there's a beautiful saying that Hinduism was already old when Buddhism was born 25 centuries ago. There's a lot in common between Buddhists and Hindus. And here too, often when I've been traveling like this through so many airports over the last 1 month, and if sometimes people are curious in a nice way, and so they ask a little bit. The last time I was flying from Detroit to LA 2 days back, and the plane had stopped over in Las Vegas for a couple of hours, for 1 hour, and there was nobody else on the plane. I was the only passenger. The stewardess was curious. They were waiting for the new passengers to come on board. How come your backpack, I have an orange backpack, how come your backpack matches your dress? How come it's all orange? Then I had to explain that I am a Hindu monk. I'm a Hindu monk. So she thought, let me see. That makes you either Christian or Buddhist, right? I said, no, Hinduism is a religion. She said, oh, sorry, what was I thinking about? You're right. And other places, sometimes they say, after I explain, they said, okay, is it something to do with the Dalai Lama? Dalai Lama. No, it is the Buddhists, they are considered to be heterodox. And there are others also, Jainas, Charvakas, who are out and out materialists. And their tribe has grown and grown and grown, and they're all over the world. And I think they are the majority. In every civilization, they must be in the majority. They say that there's no spiritual reality. It's all bosh. It's just talk. And this life is all that we have, and we are dead. That's it. We are gone. Yes?
Are they atheists?
They're atheists. They're rank materialists and atheists, and of a wide variety. Some of them are very sophisticated. Some are very gross. There's an old saying which is popular in India. Many Indians know it. Yavat jivet sukham jivet. Live happily as long as you are living. How do you live happily? Rinam kritva ghritam pivet. You see, this will take some explaining. Clarified butter was regarded as ghee. It was regarded as something delicious in India in those days. It still is, but the doctors would say it's most unhealthy because it's very fattening. So he said, you drink a lot of ghee. How do you drink a lot of ghee? You spend all you have, and that means make merry. Suppose you run out of money, borrow money. Borrow money, you pay it back, not when you're dead. So Rinam Kritva Ridam Pivit means borrow money and make fun, have a merry life. Bhasmi bhutasya dehasya punaragamanam kutha. When the body is burned to ashes, they burn people in India after death. So when the body is burned to ashes, there's no coming back. So your creditors are never going to catch you. And they were extreme atheists. So there were these people also. One thing common to all of them was, the Buddhists and Jainas were very spiritual, and Charvakas would be humiliated, would be offended if you call them spiritual. But all of them said, the many alone is real. There's no one beyond the many. The many alone is real. Buddhists saw this in a very spiritual light, that you know yourself as not the many, and you go to nirvana. And what that nirvana is open to a lot of philosophical debate. But anyhow, the many alone are real. There's no such thing as a permanent one. And such were the views, and I've just given you, if you think this is complicated, I've just given you just enough to go on with. There's much, much more. I mean, it's vast. There are 12 traditional philosophies, both heterodox and orthodox together. There are 12 traditional philosophies which are honored in India even today, among which the philosophy on which this ashrama, this center is built and our order is built is just one. This is Advaita, non-dual. But there are many others, and they're all honored, and they're all seen as different expressions of the truth. And there are some scholars who are masters of all philosophies. Just to master one would take a lifetime. For example, I met a scholar of Vishishta Advaita philosophy who said he spent 40 years to master his particular branch of philosophy. 40 years of, that was all he did for 40 years. Now, just imagine mastering all of these branches of philosophy. And there's a title which goes along mastering all of these branches. And I actually read a book I never met this person. He was living until recently in Mumbai, Swami. And the title is very, very nice. It says, Dwadasha Darshana Kanana Keshari. It's very picturesque, very Indian. The lion who stalks in the forest of 12 philosophies. 12 philosophies is like a dense forest, and this person is like a... But he's most unlion-like. He is skinny and old. And okay. So many philosophies. Now, the question is, what was Swami Vivekananda's view? What was Swami Vivekananda's view in all of this? He did something very interesting, the results of which we are just beginning to uncover. And that's what I'll talk about this evening for the rest of the time I've got. How do we know what his view was? It's so lucky that somebody actually asked him this question. They actually asked him this question in an interview in America. A newspaper reporter, and it's recorded in the newspaper and in the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. Somebody asked him, Swamiji, is it true that the Orthodox Hindus say that the one alone is real and the many are false? So he was obviously referring to this particular view. And the Buddhists say that there is no permanent reality, the many alone are in flux, changing, ever-changing, transient. That's this. Is that true? And Swami Vivekananda replied, yes, and what Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, his guru, and I have done is to show that the one and the many are the same reality, seen by the same spiritual aspirant in different levels, different spiritual attitudes. What is his answer? Look at these. Oh, sorry. That's okay. Okay. That's okay. I think that's no problem. Yeah. Look at these. The one is the reality, God alone is real, and the many are subservient to God. So one and many are both are real. One is real, and the many are parts of God. This is the second one. One alone is real, the many are false. Here, there's no question of the one. There are many, and there are various ways of interpreting it. And all of them are spiritual, except this. Now, Swami Vivekananda comes and says, not that the one and the many are different, Not that the one and the many are in the whole and part relationship. Not that the one alone is real and the many are false. But he goes and says that one and the many are the same reality, seen by different spiritual practitioners at in different spiritual attitudes or in different levels of spirituality. So this is very interesting, and this is what we'll try to grasp today. In one of the Upanishads, where the teachings of Vedanta are found, called the Chandogya Upanishad, there's this young person, the student. Most of these Upanishads are in the form of dialogues, reminiscent of Socratic dialogues between the teacher and the disciple. So there's a young boy called Shwetaketu who's sent off to study under a guru, a teacher. And he comes back after 12 years of study, and his father, who had sent him off to study, sees this boy coming back, a young man, and he sees the pride of learning on his face. And he's puffed up with learning. And the father wants to deflate him a little bit. So the father asks him, "Son, did they teach you that by knowing which everything is known? Did they teach you that by knowing which everything is known?" First of all, Shwetaketu doubts that such a thing is possible. You know one thing, you know that thing only. How is it possible to know everything by knowing one thing? And the father explains that just as, he gives beautiful examples. Remember, this was India 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. So one thing they also had lots of was pots made of clay. So imagine clay which is made into different types of pots. By knowing the clay, you know the pot. You know what kind of pots there are. In fact, if you know clay in the sense you understand what is clay, then whatever is made out of clay, you know it in one sense that you know it is clay. It's nothing but clay. And then he gives another example. Gold and ornaments. So you have a necklace, you have a bracelet, you have earrings or whatever, and they're all made of gold. When you know gold, you understand the reality behind all these ornaments. And he talks about iron and iron implements, things made of iron. Whatever is made of iron, if you understand what iron is, you know that all these things are iron. In the same way. So what's the point? If you know the material out of which something is made, one material out of which many things are made, if you know that one, knowing that one, in one sense you know everything. Just like if all the furniture is made of wood, tables, chairs, the lectern, the paneling, the floor, there are so many. If you count them individually, there will be hundreds of pieces. But if you know what wood is, from the point of view of wood, it's just one. So in the same way, the father says, there is a spiritual reality. There is a spiritual reality, like the Upanishads always say, which is appearing as so many. If you know that spiritual reality, you know everything. How do you know everything? In the sense that everything is that spiritual reality, nothing else. Shwetaketu was a very modern young person, I think, within his attitude, he's very cool about it, as Americans would say. So after hearing all this, he goes, so? Then his father really hits him with, what would we call in America, as a whammy? W-H-A-M-M-Y? Whammy. He says, that reality, that spiritual reality, that thou art. You think you are Shwetaketu, you are not Shwetaketu. You are that spiritual reality. So that is the great Mahavakya. The Upanishads are summed up in this thing. One sentence if you take away is Tat Tvam Asi. That Tat is, strangely enough, exactly equal to that. Tvam means thou or you. Asi is are. That you are. That what? That reality which is appearing as this universe. In other words, God. You are God. Before I go any further, let me just take a little aside. I have the time, yes. An interesting aside. Since we are all here, we are interested in spiritual life. Consider the fact that spiritual life, the approach to spiritual life broadly takes two parts. I teach young men who have come to become monks in Balboa. So I had the opportunity of asking them What are you seeking? What are you looking for? And I get these two answers. One answer, one group says, I am looking for God. I am searching for God. I would like to experience God. I would like to see God. I would like to find God. The other group says, not so much God. I want to know, who am I? What is the reality within? What am I? What is the purpose of life? What am I here for? Who am I, basically? What am I? Now look at this. This sentence has two parts. That and you. Interesting, isn't it? Two paths in spiritual quest. The search for God and the search for self-knowledge. Realization, God realization, self-realization. If we look into our hearts, you find one or the other predominating. We are obviously interested in, if we are primarily seeking the knowledge of the self, who am I? We would still be interested in God. It's a very interesting question, but it wouldn't be vital to us. What would be vital to us is what or who am I? What's going on here? The other group is not so much concerned with who am I, but what's the mystery behind this entire universe? What is there? What's the reality of this universe? God. Search for God, in other words. And if you go and look at the religions of the world, and here's what's interesting. Look at the religions of the world. All religions in the world. You will find they fall into either category. Some of those religions, like most of the devotional paths in Hinduism, the worship of Shiva, Shaiva religion, the worship of Vishnu, Vaishnava religion, worship of Devi, Mother Goddess, the Shakta path, all these paths and many others in Hinduism. Hinduism is vast, like an ocean. And if you look at Christianity, all the denominations, look at Islam, if you look at Judaism, Zoroastrianism, all of them are God-oriented religions. There is self-knowledge, but God is the central point. Known in different names. Vishnu or Shiva or the Father in heaven, Jehovah or Allah, or of the Mother Durga. In various ways. A power, infinite power, which creates this universe, which rules this universe, which is loving and benevolent, protective, and the search for that. So that is God. And there are other religions. There are actually other religions which do not talk about God. Obviously, and I think all of you can talk. You can guess what I'm talking about. Buddhism doesn't talk about God. They are interested in who am I? What is this inside? What is the real nature of the I? Buddhism. Jainism too doesn't talk about God. I'll leave the Charvakas out, though they are in majority all the time. They don't talk about either. They're not interested. And they won't come to the Vedanta Society either. Okay. So, you can classify all religions into two. The Tat-based religion, God-based religions, and the Tvam-based religions. Tat-based religions and the Tvam-based religions. And both have their advantages and disadvantages. Let me tell you. Take a look at the Tat-based religions. You know what's the biggest problem of most of the religions of the world? Problem is the thing which they struggle with all their lives. Is that the God-based religions or God-centered religions have the big problem is faith. You have to believe. You don't start off with any kind of God experience. It might be promised either in this life through a lot of spiritual practice or post-mortem after death. If you be a good follower of XYZ religion, XYZ religion in America, and then you get your reward after death, post-mortem. But you have to believe. It starts off with belief. That's why you see all religions have a strong, have a lot of theology dealing with belief. How to believe in God. How do you deal with doubt about the existence of God? This is a serious issue in all of these religions, isn't it? Just take a look at all these religions. Whether it's Christianity or Islam or the many, I know, like Christianity, Islam also have so many sects and groups. Or in Hinduism, everywhere. The question is raised, why should I believe in God? And how do I get faith in God? And how do I deal with doubt about the existence of God? What are the proofs of the existence of God? In Christian theology, no less in Hindu philosophy, there are so many proofs, so-called, offered about the existence of God. Why at all discuss these things? Because faith is the beginning, and it is the middle, and often it is the end of these religions, that to believe. That problem is not there in the Tuam-based religions, like Buddhism, or which there are others, not only Buddhism or Jainism. In Hinduism, you have Sankhya, you have Yoga, the philosophy of Patanjali Yoga, where the aim is self-realization. They either do not talk about God, or they cursorily, peripherally mention God. So all these paths, they do not have the problem of that, because there the question is to find out the reality of the I. And the I, nobody seriously, even the most skeptical of philosophers, nobody really questions whether I exist. I exist. Whether I am God or I am Mr. or Mrs. Z is, that's something open for discussion, but I do exist. Nobody seriously doubts that. So there is no question of faith. There is no problem of, really no serious problem of faith in these religions. But what is the other problem? The other problem is, though I have no doubt that I exist, but the I that exists, which I find myself, that is surrounded by problems. That is a very, very problematic I. I have sorrow, I have disease, I have death, I have desire, I have frustration, depression. So many problems. I'm limited. I'm limited in time. I'm born, I shall die. I'm limited in space. I'm so small. The world is so vast. I want things. I don't get them. Wealth and power and pleasure. Parking space. And I don't get. And so the I has so many problems. How do I point to something within this I, which is the quest of self-realization, which is beyond problems? The Buddhist nirvana or the Sankhyas promised apavarga, kaivalya, moksha. That's the problem in these religions. So, if I want to put it in a few words, the problem in these religions is faith, existence. This is uncertain. We are always hounded by uncertainty in our quest for God. The problem with these religions is finitude, limitation. Now you can see where I'm driving at. This approach puts the two together, using the certainty of this approach, of the Tuam approach, you approach, to knock out the uncertainty of this, using the infinitude of that to knock out the limitation of this. What this basically says is, you, where you have no doubt of that you exist, are, that means infinite. You are the infinite. That's what it claims. You are the infinite. That's why Swami Ashokananda, in one of his lectures, he was here in San Francisco in the 1960s, 50s, and earlier, 40s and 50s, 60s. So one of his lectures, he was just out and out Advaitin, non-dualist. He says, proof of God? Foolish question. It's the most obvious thing, as obvious as my existence. So what does he mean? He means this. Truly understand you, about which you have no doubt of whether you exist or not. That is God. Truly understood, well understood. You have to go through the process, of course, of understanding that. Misunderstood, I am a human being, man or woman, old or young, happy or sad, rich or poor, and destined to die. Truly understood, and I am the Spirit, I am God. There's a beautiful saying which I like. We think we are human beings in search of spiritual experience. The truth is, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Yes. So that's what Advaita tells us. The great French philosopher, Descartes, he set out to doubt what could be doubted. External world, I can doubt it. My own feelings, I can doubt it. But what I cannot doubt is that I am thinking. So in one way, he came close to this idea that the I is certain, that whatever it is, but it is some certain existence is there. So he said, cogito ergo sum, that I exist because I think. I exist because I think. Our conscious experience is a direct proof that we exist in whatever form we are. And I can't resist telling you this. There was this cartoon which I saw in a philosophy magazine, where Descartes goes out to a cafe in Paris. And the waitress comes and says, some more coffee? Monsieur Descartes? And he says, I think not. And he disappeared. Because I exist because I think. So I think not. And he goes off. But anyway, just by the way. So there is one reality which we are, and the processes by which you come to this reality, the understanding of this reality, are so interesting, but this is not our subject today. Our subject is one and the many. We can actually, Advaita Vedanta shows us that this reality, just now, by a process of reasoning, which takes us to the understanding of the reality. If you have time for questions, you can ask later on. That reality alone appears as this universe. Tattvamasi, thou art that. Now, having realized that reality, supposing we do get to that reality, our true divine nature. Now, Swami Gambhirananda, who was the president of the Ramakrishna mission a couple of decades ago, 3 decades ago in fact, he writes in a beautiful essay, the enlightened person, the one who realizes this truth, the divinity within me is God. There are 3 possible attitudes. What does he or she do afterwards? 3 possible attitudes. He does take a long vacation, because it's all done what he wanted to do in life. 3 attitudes. One is, he may want to remain immersed in the one. I am existence, consciousness, bliss. I shall remain immersed in that. If you know Swami Vivekananda's life, as Narendranath, when he first got that experience, Sri Ramakrishna asked him, what do you want? And he said, I want to remain in samadhi, in the divine bliss, in ecstasy. Once in a while, come down for a snack. He actually said that. If a mind comes down and grab something to eat and go back into that thing. And Sri Ramakrishna scolded him, luckily for us. He said, shame on you. I thought you'd be like a great banyan tree under whose shade so many thousands will take refuge and find peace and relief. And Swami Vivekananda came out to the world to work for us, and so today we are sitting here in San Diego, we have this Vedanta Society, and so on. But that's one attitude. He could have taken that. And there are many great spiritual teachers or non-teachers who are completely unknown to the world. They have realized that, and they have remained incognito, and they remain like that, and passed away. The body has passed away. They are one with the spirit, with Atman, with Brahman. That's one attitude. And that's also an extremely exalted, wonderful attitude, truly. The second one, Swami Gambhirananda says, he could remain immersed in the one, but he would still be aware of the many. He wouldn't turn away from the many. And the many would appear to him like a magic show. What is known in Vedanta as Maya. The one appearing as the many. And it would appear like a magic show. And he would be delighted in this. You know? Happiness and sadness, it's bliss to him. There was somebody, an enlightened soul who came to Dakshineshwar when Sri Ramakrishna was there. And he behaved like a crazy person. And the little kids, they were cruel, as children can be. They chased him and threw stones at him. And some of them hit him and he was bleeding. And he was laughing all the way. There was another person who begged for food, or some food that was thrown away after people had their food in the temple. And the dog was eating. And this person would put his hand around the dog's neck and eat from the same plate. It's the same thrown away food. And people thought he was crazy. But some others knew that he was an enlightened soul. When they asked him, what are you doing? And he said, oh Vishnu, why do you laugh? When Vishnu is eating with Vishnu, is eating Vishnu with Vishnu. Why does Vishnu laugh? The food is Vishnu, the dog is Vishnu, this one is also Vishnu, and the eating is also Vishnu. And you're all standing around and laughing, that is Vishnu too. So why does Vishnu laugh when Vishnu eats Vishnu with Vishnu? Vishnu is God in that sense. So that's another attitude. And these people sometimes are seen as the crazy masters in every spiritual tradition you have them, who seem to be eccentric, mad from our point of view. They see the world as a magic show, that's something amazing, and they behave accordingly. And there's a third attitude, when you realize the one in the many, being centered in the one looks upon the many with love, with compassion, with a desire to help them come to the the blissful one, which is their birthright, which is their heritage, which is within all of them, but they don't know it. And these are the great teachers in all religions. These are the great teachers in all religions. That's what Sri Ramakrishna wanted Swami Vivekananda to become. Be one with the one and be compassionate towards the many, or see the one in the many. See the one in the many, and you worship the one through service. So, Sri Ramakrishna used to tell these wonderful little stories. There are three friends who walked to there was a very high wall. They were walking along, and they were curious, what's on the other side of the wall? And they somehow, with great difficulty, they climbed over. The first person climbed over, and he saw something. He started dancing on top of the wall, and he jumped over. And the other two were taken aback. What's there? What's so great? The second person climbed over, and he did the same thing and jumped over. Third person climbed over and saw on the other side a vast field of festivity. You know, in India it's called a mela, a huge festival. So he saw that, and he was delighted, and he wanted to join in the festivities and jump over. Then he suddenly realized, if I too go cross over, who will help all the people of my village? Village meaning the world, this world, who are in suffering, who are in sorrow. So he turned around, got down, and he called all of them, come and see. This is a spiritual teacher. It's born of compassion. Sri Ramakrishna says, Shiva Jnani Jiva Seva. Serve all beings, the many, with the knowledge that they are none other than God. Knowing, serve all beings, seeing the one in them. Shiva Jnani Jiva Seva. That's why Swami Vivekananda could say, my God the poor, my God the ignorant, my God the sick. And worship the poor with financial help, with economic help. Lend a helping hand to them, not as help, as worship. Because that is God. God has come to you in that form. My God, the sick. You worship the sick not with flowers and incense, but you worship them with medicine, with kind words, with help, with care. The ignorant, the millions of people who have no access to education. You worship God in them with the help of secular education. So, converting service into spiritual practice. For a person who has attained that, it's no longer spiritual practice. It's a real worship of God in all these forms. For those of us who have not attained to that state, we can convert our life, what we are doing, into spiritual practice. As a worship of God, of the one in the many with which we have to deal all the time. For us, the one is still hypothetical. We have to take it on faith or try to understand it and try to realize it. For the enlightened people, for them it is our living reality. So the worship of the one in the many, knowing the many to be none other than the one. That is what Swami Vivekananda taught. And that's why we, in the Ramakrishna Mission, we have schools and colleges and relief activities and hospitals, and we are not doing social work. We are not helping people. No. If you ask me, really, Swami, what are you doing? I am worshipping my God. Where? When I sit for meditation, I am worshipping God. When I go and teach in the class, I am worshipping God. Swami Trigunatitananda, who started the center in San Francisco, the first Hindu temple. So he is a very tough character. He was a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. He succeeded Swami Turiyanandaji, and one American disciple writes that Swami Turiyananda, who came first, Swami Vivekananda brought him over. He was a Vedantin and always dependent on the mother, which means God. Which mother's will, and leave everything to the mother. Mother means God. And the American disciple writes, the new Swami, Trigunatitananda, does not believe in leaving anything to the mother. So he's a very tough Swami. And one thing he said was, he told his disciples, who were all Americans at that time, and he said, I will criticize you in order to point out your faults to help you along in spiritual life, and you are free to criticize me too. If you find anything wrong in me, you should tell me. So one day in the criticism session, one of the disciples pointed out, Swami, when you speak, your voice quavers. It shakes. When you speak to the people who come to the temple. And the Swami was overcome with emotion, uncharacteristic emotion. He said, what can I do? When I stand up to speak, I see the Divine Mother that is before me. Mother herself. She is sitting here listening to listen to my talk. So I cannot control my emotion, and hence my voice quavers. So it comes to the point of tears. And again, Swami Shivananda, he is the president of the Ramakrishna Mission. When people used to come to him in Belur Math to bow down to him, he was the head of the whole organization, he would bow down to them. And people would be embarrassed. And they said, Swami, what are you doing? People feel uneasy if you bow down to them. He said, what can I do? When they come, I see their Ishta Devata, the chosen form of God, which each one of them worships. I see the form of God first. It's only when I bow down to that form disappears and the human form comes in front. So he sees the one and the many as the same reality. The one is the divine reality which comes in the front, and when he bows down, the human reality comes up. And then only I can talk to them. Otherwise, how can I instruct them? How can I teach them if I see God in front of me? So, the one and the many are the same reality seen by different spiritual aspirants in different spiritual attitudes. That was Swami Vivekananda's teaching. Sister Nivedita, I'll end with this. Sister Nivedita, his disciple, she gives in her introduction, masterful introduction to the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. She writes, all that our master taught, that means Swami Vivekananda, it was already there in the scriptures of India. It's already there. But if there is anything new, he says it is this doctrine of one and the many are the same reality. And she writes, it is this which gives crowning significance to the life and teaching of our master, Vivekananda. What does it mean? And she brings out the implications so powerfully in such stunning language. Henceforth, no difference between the sacred and the secular. The sacred, the one. Secular, the many. Henceforth, no difference between the sacred and the secular. You can spiritualize the many, your work. He says, she writes, now to labor is to pray. To hold and protect is as sacred a trust as to renounce and quit. So, not that automatically the secular becomes sacred. It has to be spiritualized. You have to see the one in the many. If you just see the many, if you just see the world as the world, it's still the old life. But in this world, if we can, and there are methods for doing that, if we can see God in everything, then the one and the many are the same reality. The many also becomes spiritual. No difference between sacred and secular. She writes, my master Vivekananda told me that the science, spirituality and art all lead to the same goal. But it requires Advaita to understand this. Not inevitably. Science and art does not inevitably lead to spirituality, but it can. You can convert science and art into a spiritual pursuit. And people have. Even without all this philosophy, many great scientists and many great artists, not all, but many of them have been very spiritual people. Even Einstein, for example, he said, I don't believe in the conventional God, but I do believe in a spirit. Many of them sense a kind of spirit. So it happens. Artists, of course, it happens all the time. They sense it. There was this mathematician, Mohan Maharaj, a monk who got India's highest science award last year. So the first time a monk has got it. And he's a topologist, a pure mathematician. He comes to California, but not to talk about Vedanta, he comes to talk about pure mathematics. He's an award-winning mathematician. And when he got that award, and naturally the press were after him, and he makes a good story, a monk who is a mathematician. So, and he's publicity shy. So he was running away from the press, and I told him, why don't you go and talk to them? They'll stop chasing you. And one of the things they asked him was, you're a monk, and how can you be a scientist and a mathematician at the same time? He said, I see no conflict. My mathematics is my spiritual practice. So of course his idea of spirituality is very rarefied compared to most conventional ideas of religion, but it is spiritual. So spirituality and the secular world can be spiritualized. Not just that monk, all of us in the Ramakrishna Mission, when we do all kinds of work, we are not doing worship and work. All the work that we do is also worship. And that follows directly from this idea. Just one last point. Quickly, I just give it to you, and then we can have a little bit of question answer time for Arati now. Yes.
We'll have question answers at the very end.
Very end. Okay, just one last point. 3 things. In the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna wanted to give up his duty and only seek spiritual realization, Krishna told him, Ma manusmara yudhyacha. Yudhya means fight this battle. That means do your duty and think of me, think of God. Think of God and do your duty. And do your duty. When Jesus Christ was asked, what are the most important commandments? He said, love, number 1. Out of the 10 commandments. Love the Lord thy God with all thy might and all thy heart, number 1. And number 2, love thy neighbor. And love thy neighbor. When Swami Vivekananda started the Ramakrishna mission and everything, all this, he gave us a motto. Atmano mokshartam jagatitayacha. For your own enlightenment and for the welfare of the world. Homework, assignment. Can you connect it to this idea that one and the many are the same reality? Thank you very much.